Being recorded.
Hello all, good evening, good morning, and late good afternoon to everyone. As the folks are joining, let's give them a few seconds. Okay, cool, right. So I think probably people will join as we kickstart this session. And thank you everyone for joining. And welcome to the BVSSH Pacific Meetup. And today is 20th of September. And I'm BMK, your host today for this evening. And I have been joined with folks from Nationwide Building Society and also Stephen, my colleague in this region. And thank you everyone for your interest in joining us and tuning in for today's Pacific Meetup. And just to give you the purpose of the Sooner, Safer, Happier community is to provide inspiration for those wanting to achieve better value, sooner, safer, happier outcomes in their organization. And in the past, we have invited the change leaders, the transformation agents, and some of the leaders from the organizations to come and share their experiences with our community. And on this note, we have folks from Nationwide Building Society. It's early in the morning for the folks, and they are joining us. And this session is being recorded, and the recording will be available and will be posted to the YouTube channel. So you will be able to watch later if you're, if you'd like to take notes, or if you want to replay and watch again, or if you'd like to share with some of your colleagues, you could do that. And also, just for your information, we will be picking up one lucky winner from this participants group, and then we'll be giving away one book, the Business Value Sooner, Safer, Happier book. So one of the lucky winner will get that book as well. And please feel free to post your questions to the chat we have on the chat channel. So my colleague is managing the chat today, and we'll be asking the questions towards the end of the session. And we are in treat indeed for the session. And once again, welcome to the Nationwide Building Society folks. And now it's over to Richard. Richard, thank you very much for joining, and it's over to you to introduce and take the proceedings further.
Excellent. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody and those watching back. It's a genuine pleasure to be here. So Nationwide Building Society, UK-based retail banking player. So we're a building society owned by our members. We've got roughly 15 million members who hold some form of retail banking product with us, multiple relationships. And yeah, it's an absolute pleasure for a team of a raft of different contributors to be able to talk to you about the journey we have been on over the last few years. I will leave it to folks to introduce themselves as we move across from section to section. And as BMK says, please do raise questions. Please do put things in the chat. This is hopefully a two-way interactive conversation. So up front, for us, this is, as ever, an ongoing journey. This is a conversation that has had almost multiple starts and is itself an exciting and winding journey that for all of us contributing in all of our respective organizations, I hope what we're about to share resonates and also kind of triggers some wry smiles. So up front, how do we get here? How are we here today, and what's this mean to us? Ways of working began for us with this. So this is summer 2019, 3 years ago. At that point, to set us in context, we were already running what was a digital transformation, capital D, capital T. So taking a digital part of our organization and imbuing that with product-based ways of working, imbuing that with modern technologies, AWS and CI/CD, and taking a more iterative and incremental approach to customer feedback-driven development. So digital had digital transformation. We also at that point had a start again investment. So we had something called Nationwide for Business that was then based out in a WeWork, taking totally modern cloud native tech and starting from scratch. And in parallel, the wider organization, the core of Nationwide, was on its own journey, something called We Are Change, looking at the broader shift from away from project towards product. But what I would say back in 2019, a relatively new COO, a guy called Patrick Eltridge, had joined beginning of 2019. And I think what he spotted was an opportunity to bring together some what were quite disparate efforts. So digital transformation in one part of the organization, Nationwide for Business, physically separate in a different building, in a different city, and then the work in the core. And I think what Patrick did as the COO back in summer 2019 was to find a way to create a shared vision. And he did that with John Smart and what has now become the Sooner Safer Happier book. At that point in July 2019, I think John was just starting the book, was working through it. And we were incredibly fortunate then as leaders within the COO team to have John and Zsolt and Miles come and work with us to talk through, if not a North Star, then at least a shared understanding of what these different principles could mean to us organizationally as a building society. And I think what resonated for me in that session, so there's about 100 leaders from across the COO organization, or what we call resilience and agility. For those 100 leaders, that was probably the first time that together, and with the COO actively sponsoring and stewarding the conversation, we talked about DevOps. And DevOps, for example, not being heretical and being challenging, but DevOps being a North Star, a vision. It's the first time we talked about that sense of supporting teams, unlocking value and improving value. It's the first time we talked about flow at a society and organizational level. It's the first time ultimately we introduced the concept of ways of working enablement. So here we are back in July 2019, being introduced by the COO to some principles that have then shaped a journey we've been on for the last few years and will continue to be on for many years to come. What did I think about it as I look back at this picture? I remember being quite galvanized by it at the time. I'd already been a fan of John's work, and I was a fan of things like the PMO is Dead, Long Live the PMO, and the DevOps Enterprise Summit talks. I knew of John's work, but this, ultimately, if I look 3 years down the line, has left us to an enablement center and a community. It's led us to a capability for measurement and insight that informs and supports all of the work we do in improving flow. It's led us to an entire agenda around the leaning of portfolio management, the changes to the operating model, the governance, the funding, the value stream model. It's led us to a real focus on intelligent control or continuous compliance, the embedment of control into the work as an enabling bureaucracy. And it's led us to more of a focus on technical excellence. So this work back in 2019 has led to a raft of linked initiatives that, as of today, we find ourselves really well connected. When I look back at 2019, I saw that digital was almost in competition with change, was almost in competition with Nationwide for Business. Whereas now what I see is that we've got a real sense of movement and community. We've got a real sense of a network of autonomous, empowered, aligned teams supporting this journey. And we've got a small set of SMEs from across a real omnist, as John would say, an omnist set of topics from lean agile, OKR coaches, measurement experts, and a real focus on culture. So here, this is just some of the collateral we now use, the team in-house, multidisciplinary, and we support the entire society rather than just change or tech or digital. This is something that is for our society. And 3 years on, incredibly proud to be part of that team, be leading the team, be supporting the creation of a capability that supports the society's progression. So without further ado, if that gives us the background and the context, what I'd like to do now is to hand across to members of the team and members of the network to talk through their particular focus areas. And you'll find that there's a real kind of thread running through this, a golden thread of focusing on culture, flow, and value. So at this point, I'd like to hand across to John for a conversation on culture.
Thanks, RJ. So yeah, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, whichever part of the world you're in. So yeah, I'm John, and I'm here to talk to you about culture. Really, what is it about culture that helps with the flow of value? Next slide, please, RJ. So some of you might be familiar with the work of Amy Edmondson. Amy Edmondson wrote a book called The Fearless Organisation, and within that she set out, she'd done decades worth of research into this thing called psychological safety. And within that, she kind of sets out that the research had shown that psychological safety, indeed innovation, can be thwarted by low levels of psychological safety, and psychological safety is key for that culture of being able to fail faster and that learning culture. And Amy had set out kind of 7 questions, which we've called which is the external standard reference there. She set out 7 questions which we could survey and form a baseline measure of psychological safety within the society, within the building society. And we set out a hypothesis that high psychological safety is a key culture enabler for high performing teams. And I guess we were kind of basing that on work that Google had done previously, and something called Project Aristotle, where Google had investigated why do some teams outperform other teams? What is it about those high performing teams? And the magic ingredient was psychological safety. Those teams that outperforming others, the common ingredient was psychological safety. So we wanted to set that out as a hypothesis and kind of test that for ourselves. And also that levels within some internal areas are low or average, acting as a barrier to improve flow of work and value for our members. So what were the expected outcomes of this? And we've been on this journey for about 8-9 months now. So the expected outcomes was that the object outward mindset, and I'll explain what that is in a second, could act as an enabler to improve psychological safety. Back a slide, please, Richard, sorry. Expected outcomes that arbitrary outward mindset could act as an enabler to improve psychological safety, and that delivery to either mixed groups and intact teams would indeed see an improvement in psychological safety and collaboration. So next slide, please, RJ. So arbitrary outward mindset, what is it? Sambidge is an American institution, and there's been decades worth of academic research from all of the key kind of learning centres across the globe, Harvard, Oxford, Yale, etc., who've done a lot of research into mindset. What is mindset? How do we see people? Mindset is how do we see people? How do we see challenges? How do we see opportunities? And Sambidge as an institution kind of harnessed all of this material, this research, and packaged it up into something called the outward mindset. And essentially, it helps you understand why we get into conflict. It helps you understand how we perpetuate these conflicts, how we almost love to get into these conflicts at work. And of course, these things start to undermine psychological safety. We don't want to speak up as much. And so the work they've done, it helps you understand the ingredients into that conflict, why it happens, how you get out of it. And what we've been doing over that time is, over the last few months, is we've been running workshops. We've put over 400 colleagues have been through 60-minute bite-sized workshops where they've been able to understand why these conflicts happen, how they happen, how we perpetuate them. And we've also taken 5 or 6 cohorts, teams, through 2-day workshops that gives them the practical tools to understand and have levels of self-awareness about their own mindset, so they can start to understand why they're getting into conflicts themselves, and then practical tools about how to get out of that mindset and be able to improve collaboration, improve relationships, and previous relationships that were difficult for them. And we've seen a number of use cases come out of that. Conflict between teams, both internally and externally, conflict within teams, and teams just looking to move from average to high performing. And the important footnote there is that intact teams, leadership groups, not mixed cohorts, have proven to be the most effective. And the reason why is that when we've been through the 2-day workshops with intact teams, with leadership groups, we've been able to help them with ongoing coaching and focus on specific relational issues. And next slide, please, Richard. So what have we found then? What have we found from the experiment? So back to the expected outcome, that Sambidge outward mindset could act as an enabler to improve psychological safety through how colleagues see. We've seen that increase by 6% over 6 weeks. So we would take the intact group before they go through the workshop. We'd get them to do this survey with the 7 questions set out by Amy Edmondson, and those 7 questions are listed below. We'd get them to go through a survey. We'd measure current levels of psychological safety. We'd take them through the 2-day workshop, the Arbiter outward mindset, and then we'd resurvey that some 6-8 weeks on. And what we've started to see with those groups is that levels of psychological safety are indeed improving. We've seen a 6% uptick in levels of psychological safety. In terms of that second expected outcome, that delivery to mixed groups and intact teams will see an improvement in psychological safety, that indeed has been proven to be true so far. We have seen that. But as I said a minute ago, what we have realised is that focusing on intact teams and leadership groups is the way to go, because we're able to provide that ongoing coaching and support. So looking at the Amy Edmondson questions there, the 7 questions, you can see we're kind of highlighting where the biggest areas of improvement have been. If you make a mistake in front of this team, it is often held against you. We're seeing an improvement. That's that being able to fail, and know it's okay to fail and okay to learn from it. So we're starting to see an improvement there. The highest one of all is that people on this team sometimes reject others for being different. That's actually improving. It's the highest growth topic. It is difficult to ask other members of this team for help. We're seeing that improve. So people are now feeling comfortable saying, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? And also work with members of this team. My unique skills and talents are valued and utilised. We're seeing an improvement there. Now, interestingly, what we have seen a decline in is that there were additional 5 questions that focused on the specific part of the outward mindset around relationship, being able to influence and collaborate. And what we've seen there is a decline. And what we've determined and what we've put that down to is that people are moving from unconscious incompetence. So before the workshop, they're unaware of why relationships are difficult, why they can't collaborate better with some, and then they move to conscious incompetence. So when we measure them again 6-8 weeks after the workshop, they understand why. So we would move to that conscious incompetence, and we're seeing a decline in scores. So in terms of where we're at now, we continue to experiment with this. We're getting leadership interest at a senior level, and they're starting to see the results. We're obviously advertising the measurements that we've got coming from it, and we're going to continue to experiment with it. And we're going to continue to confirm the results coming from it. But so far, the signs are encouraging that we can indeed improve psychological safety through the use of our outward mindset, and that this in turn will help culturally with flow and pushing value through. So I'm going to pause there. I'm probably out of time, and I think it's questions at the end, isn't it? On to the next one, Richard.
Thank you, John. Hello, everyone. I'm Abhishek, and I'll talk about how we went enabling continuous learning culture through communities of practice. Next slide, please, Adi. So some interesting facts about our human brain. Though our human brain, despite just weighing 3 pounds, it accounts for about 20% of body's blood, oxygen, and energy consumption. The human brain comprises about 100 billion neurons, with each having 100 to 10,000 connections with other neurons. Every thought, memory, and our learnings are stored in these neurons. Whenever we learn something new, new connections are formed. So just imagine the immense capacity our brain has to keep learning and creating new connections. Next slide, please, Ajay. So how do people learn most effectively? There are 3 broad categories for effective learning. The first one is when we construct something. It could be when we physically construct something, or when we digitally make something, we learn through that mode. We learn through cognition. When we think things, when we observe, we reflect, we process feedback, and when we make sense, we are learning. And then we learn when we are in a community. When a group of people come together and learn from each other, they build a collection of shared practices. Now, ways of working community of practice is inspired by the 3rd pillar, which is community. Next slide, please. So what are the benefits of communities of practice? Now, any organization employing people with specialist skills can benefit from a community of practice. It helps in the professional development of its employees. It breaks silos because it brings people across communities together. And because people are coming together, it supports in sharing knowledge. And when we share knowledge, uh, we create better practices. And this leads to scaling of approaches and happier staff. Next slide, please. Now, uh, data and analytics community of practice is modeled on similar principles and benefits. Now, it supports the community by bringing them together and encouraging learning through sharing. We share good practices with the members of the community, and that avoids reinventing the wheel. Uh, Through the community of practice, we encourage diversity of thoughts, and we encourage bringing heads together to solve complex problems. Now, we typically have three different kind of sessions. We do spotlight on sessions where we welcome speakers who have experimented something. They could share their success or their failures. We have deep dive sessions which are more conceptual in nature. We discuss patterns, we discuss new approaches, frameworks, tools, and then we have surgeries which are more of a lean coffee session where we can open up for Q&A and peer-to-peer support. Next slide, please. So our journey so far, we've been running the community of practice for over 18 months now with a fortnightly cadence. We have a community of about 300 plus who are invited, and we get about a rolling attendance of 50 plus people. The community members come together and they prepare the backlog of topics and prioritize them based on what their need is. The sessions which we do are recorded and they are shared over Confluence so that they are accessible to folks who are unable to attend or new joiners, or for example, if you want to take back the learning sessions into your teams and reflect. We have encouraged community ownership by having a team of COP advocates, and now we are pivoting from learning theory to practicing concepts. There is a regular feedback which we collect from the community so that we continuously improve how we run the COP, and every session we collect an NPS score to understand how effective and how well received the session was, and we've been averaging about 4 out of 5. Next slide, please. So what next? The community of practice is between forming and maturing stage at the moment. We are applying our learnings to solve real world impediments, blocking teams, and build common approaches and patterns which can be used by the organization. As part of maturing, we are also encouraging the creation of an ecosystem which will help the members in coming together in smaller groups outside the COP. So that's where we are, and that's what we aspire. That's about it from me. I'll hand it over to Zsolt and Simon.
Sorry, thank you, Abhishek. So the next is Measure for Learning. I'm Zsolt, Berend, nice to meet you all. Product owner for the Measure for Learning product, and we will see what it does. Please to the next slide, Richard. So our vision is, you go to the next slide, having colleagues having access to ways of working data insights as self-serve, importantly self-serve, to use it for continuous improvements. You could go to the next slide. So in order to achieve that, we use the pattern 8.5 from a book which is Measure for Learning. So the starting point is that we needed data. So we created data from different sources and connected data sets. So this is where the work is. In our particular case, Jira, production service now, and also enterprise one, where we have all the application mappings. It's important that this data is connected and also it's auto-harvested. So every day we get a daily feed, so it's continue being updated. We provided, based on interaction with the consumers, with our colleagues at all levels, what kind of data metrics insights they need for their work and for continuous improvements. And this is about quality. This is about alignment, so how the work is aligned from strategy to execution and also end to end, so creating visibility and connecting to the value. Flow metrics, so this is concerned with how long it takes to actually get to production, how long it takes to get something done within the team. So it's all about flow and flow efficiency. We work with the GRC colleagues, so governance, risk and control. So this is about how do we engage more and how do we measure effectiveness of the risk and mitigating risk. Happier is all about the colleague happiness, which has a direct positive correlation. Happier colleagues leads to happier customers. So as Abhishek was talking about, and also John, there are a lot of work going on around the happier dimension across the organization. Please to the next layer. So this is important to look into self-serve, into trends, correlations, and this side, looking into differentiating correlation, whether it's just correlation or causation as well. So there are lots of discussion with teams, with the data, how the data is actually is useful or not useful, what the data is telling, how can they use it for continuous improvements. And so we created a product. This is a dashboard product with drill down capabilities, and the whole reason is so that previously people were asking for data from some SMEs. So SMEs provided the data as a bespoke, but there was no access by everybody, by all colleagues or teams to this data to use it and drill down and understanding the whys and underlying data and underlying reasons. So this became a self-serve. Next, please, Richard. Sorry, there are lots of animation here on this slide. And then, very importantly, the outer layer of this onion which is the mindset shift, which is around creating psychological safety. So not using this data to weaponize the data, not using this data to a stick, but actually use it as self-serve for continuous improvement and for learning. Please go to the next slide. Thank you. So our approach was invite over inflict. So we never push this. So if you want to use the data, if you want to use the dashboard or the product, we were happy about and we have, but we never pushed. So as you see in this chart, we often talk about diffusion of innovation, where we start with the innovators and the early adopters. And then if you do the Everett Rogers bell curve into a cumulative curve, then you see this, what we actually have seen in our journey. So we started with the innovators and early adopters around end of 2019. Couple of teams, couple of people were interested. Oh, okay, so I can access the data, I can pull the data. This is exciting. And so immediately we asked them if you could give feedback. It's a learning loop for us, quick learning loop. So if you could move to the animation, Richard. So early adopters, and what we introduced as the next step, Richard, please, maybe 2 clicks, that we introduced bi-weekly show and tell. So we invited colleagues and teams to please share how you're using the data. So instead of us talking about this, we asked the teams to actually present and share, and it was more powerful. So based on invitation in practice, show and tells, and also we provided training and coaching on demand. So as an impact, we have now more than 1,300 colleagues at all levels, individuals, teams, team of teams, value streams, and senior leadership using this data. Thank you. So a couple of main services we provide. One is around the value. If you could please go to the next slide. So this is the golden thread, which Richard mentioned already in the introduction. So we are looking into the connection between strategy and execution. So what's the percentage of connectedness? Often in organization, this is disconnected. So you have the portfolio, maybe in PowerPoint, and then you have the different Kanban or Scrum boards at the execution at the team level. So what we are interested in, what is the percentage of connectedness which created handshake and created better collaboration and positive step change in the organization? So we measure practically the percentage of stories that's not in the picture, but stories below the epic, percentage of stories linked all the way up to the top of the portfolio. And so the conversation starts when it's not aligned. Why is it not aligned? Are teams working on some which there is no outcome for at the portfolio layer, and vice versa? We measure also the top down, whether any in-flight objectives, any in-flight outcomes have any story execution level associated with or not. So we measure the connectedness, and this is a really positive step change within the organization. Please go to the next slide. So big interest on flow. Maybe Richard, just click through on the next slide, just build up the animation. So outcome. So if we are talking about an end-to-end work, which is expressed as an outcome, so as an outcome having an impact on our members, our customers, then often there is multiple teams working on it. It's not one single team. So what we see is that there is team A handing over to team B, maybe to team C. There is a dependency between them. Then there is also another handover to team D, and it could go on and go on. At one point, it goes to production. So often this is not visible at organization because we only see the local context. Maybe within team A, there is a Kanban board or a Scrum board, so progress is tracked, but definitely it's not visible what's happening between. So there is work and wait and work and wait on all the way until production, which gonna give us an overarching lead time measure. This is not measured or not visible usually at organizations, but we make it happen because we thought it's really important that not only the local context, but also the overarching end-to-end visibility is there, and so that end-to-end flow can be measured. So just an example of what it can do. So you can measure the local context and the trend, how it looks in terms of the cycle time when work started and done in a local context, in a local project within Jira, for example, and then the end-to-end context. As you see, maybe next click, Richard, please, that these numbers could differ a lot. So maybe you have a relatively small number, in this case it's also high in this example, but then it's a much higher number until it actually gets to production. So what's happening in between, that's the visibility, which is the gold information, which this enable it to end-to-end helped us and help the teams to using this. And with that, I hand it over to Simon.
Thank you, Zsolt. Hello, everyone. My name's Simon. I'm a PMO lead for what we call missions at Nationwide, and really a mission is a top-level value stream, and the one I look after is called hassle-free money. So we look after the banking, savings, and loan products in UK retail banking, as RJ mentioned at the beginning. So I just want to talk through what I see from my side against with the mission leadership and how our teams are going. Quite a big team, quite a lot of diverse teams at different stages of maturity in that mission. So it's been quite a challenge, but just put up here a couple of metrics. So it just shows how we're looking at continuous improvement across some of those key metrics. And I've just highlighted two there, one around the golden thread and one around flow. And we're seeing that we're just seeing that dial shifting from May through to July. And that's, again, just reflective of this continuous improvement and the iteration that we go through working with those teams. Up until May, it was probably around data quality. So we did the data quality. So we really started to then shift the dial on actually what is this doing? And what I want to talk about really is the conversations we have with the leadership and on the delivery teams and feature teams and sprint teams, etc. Is people like to know what they're working on and why they're doing it, and that's why we introduced the concept of the golden thread. So actually everyone in the organization, there's over 1,000 people in the mission working on this stuff, everyone has got that satisfaction of knowing that what they're doing is actually aligned to what the mission is, the society is doing. And bearing in mind we're member led, that's a really important value stream for us. So working on that golden thread is getting that data pushed through. We use Jira, so that's how we measure that. But yeah, we just need to get that a bit higher. Some of the reasons why we can't ever get to 100%, there is some experimentation which isn't connected to the work, and everyone puts stories into Jira for that. And then we're still working through with the product teams that use Jira. Yes, that should be part of the golden thread, but they're just a little bit behind the curve. So we're working through it. We bring this into the leadership team and into feature teams on a regular basis, and we have those active debates around that. The other one that I've highlighted there is the visibility top down. Again, it's similar to the golden thread, I suppose. There is that difference, but we're working through that. But we've had quite a material improvement in that over time. And again, this is really just around conversations, having that debate, creating that psychological safety environment to try things out. We have been careful not to weaponize this because there are multiple teams involved in this. And how we've done that is we've just got a top level dashboard, and actually where one team within that is doing better than the other, we shift the debate really to, okay, well, how have you done that? What can other people learn from it? And then take that away and, you know, work at a more individual level to say, well, actually, you know, such and such a person in this team did that. Then we can get that conversation flowing, just so we can get those improvements across the team at that more granular level to avoid any sort of weaponizing or competition. So we've got lots more metrics that we focus on. I just wanted to put this out there around that. And as I say, it's really around that dialogue, clear reporting that is self-serve and we can drill down, and then experimenting and learning from each other and how that works to try and get that moving out across the teams. It's going to be a long journey, but as you can see in that sort of 2 or 3 months, we are making progress, and we will continue to keep doing so. And that's it for me.
It's a good shout, actually. I didn't spot. Did we have Kim with us? If we don't have Kim with us, hey Tony, do you fancy doing some lean?
I can wing it. I can wing it. Yeah. Okay. Oh no, there's Kim. Phew. Oh. The sound is not working for me properly. Kim, is it?
No, I can't hear Kim.
Hi, Kim.
She's put in the chat, Tony, if you could take it. She's having trouble with her audio.
Oh, that's a bad second choice. Okay, I'll give it a try. So setting up for value, we were in our metrics, as mentioned, 2 major categories: the value and flow. Value, of course, always being challenging because it is apples and oranges, different in every different context. So what this presentation on value is about is really enabling colleagues to understand value in their context and be able to apply it to themselves. So basically, everyone has to understand what they're driving for, seek that understanding of metrics, and then know, you know, what's their North Star that they're heading for. So here this is showing that usually there's quite a gap. And if you think about this in old school project management terms, you know, in Prince 2, you would have had a benefits realization plan that would have been flung over the fence. And hopefully 2 years later, someone will come along and realize some value from your project in the terms of cost or revenue. If it was a financial benefit, something in a member experience, perhaps a risk reduction. These are the typical categories, aren't they, of the lagging benefits that would have been talked about. But no one ever checked, mainly because the team was disbanded by then, so you're not around to even check. And there's a logical gap sometimes, or often, between the capabilities, the actual outputs, deliverables produced, and those asserted. lagging benefits. If we can just go on to the next slide, and we'll see what are the logical steps that happen in between. So say you do produce something, and let's just say we're generous that it's exactly what the customer needed and it's fantastic. How do you know? And how does it get into the customer's hands? Well, it goes beyond flinging it over the fence on day one at the go live, doesn't it, to exploit the new capability that you've created. And usually that's some kind of support. We're looking at the customer behaviors. So then when we look at the leading metrics, you're looking for that. You're looking for a metric that is impacted straight away, that you don't have to wait for 12 or 18 months before you see some benefit. And it can be just, the fairly typical things you might see in utilization of the product itself. How many users are even using it? What is the immediate fast feedback, the qualitative feedback as well. These are the sorts of things you might see much more quickly than you would expect to see those lagging metrics. And that's where the learning happens, to be able to look at those things. If we just click on one more, you've got a bunch of assumptions always. All those arrows between those boxes are actually perhaps the most important thing. The arrows all represent assumptions. You can get around the whiteboard as a team and go, yes, we think these are our leading metrics and that's going to lead us on to value. But of course, every step in that chain is an assumption. So do we really understand who the customers are? Are we meeting their needs really? And then if we can surface out explicitly some of those assumptions, we can then go and test them. So for example, something simple, the number of users, theoretically, that leads to revenue. But only if your cost model and your business model's right, could lead to a loss too, couldn't it? More users accelerate your loss. So these assumptions can be tested by being very explicit. So we perform a service with teams to map this out in their context, a coaching service. And so we have a lot of virtual or real whiteboard sessions to help them discover what their metrics are and that they can use those for their local reporting. We're finding the organisation is learning to focus more on leading metrics. Traditionally in an organisation, they just say, show me the money, I want that lagging benefit. Then you go, well, what's that being caused by? Hard to say. Now we're seeing much more emphasis on an appreciation for. Sorry, that was my next door neighbour drilling a hole in the wall. So next slide, please. So then that leads into, I think it's got a couple of animations. Click through those animations. This is, if you like, a expanded version of build, measure, learn. From Lean Startup. So you've got the value story. We call it a value story. In other words, that set of assumptions, that set of metrics that you have is telling a story of how you're getting from what you're delivering to value to the customer. So that leads to this iterative process of making your assumptions, testing your assumptions, delivering something, and reflecting to see whether that really is what has happened in the end. So if we go on to the final slide too. So this is looking at the capabilities or the environment that we've built to encourage this. So, obviously, as I said, this is a capability that needs to be built into all teams. Everyone needs to take responsibility. So they have to be able to measure value in the first place, do that analysis, understand what they want to measure. It comes with that cultural habit of course correction that relates to the cultural measure, the things we mentioned at the beginning of psychological safety, because it has to be safe to admit that we have assumptions that could be wrong and might be wrong and we need to change direction. So all these things are interrelated there. And it leads, then incentivizes iterative delivery, because people go, well, we need to test these assumptions. We can't just go for a 2.5-year program plan with one big bang go live and hope for the best. We need to test this out. And these things come out through that supported coaching. The other thing that we've done recently is have those leading metrics up at the portfolio level included in the very senior reporting, with the intent there of changing that conversation from just have you delivered the thing yet to what is the benefit and are you following through to realise those benefits, or are you iterating in order to test assumptions and deliver incrementally. So I'll get feedback from Kim later to tell me how much I butchered that, but anyway, that was the winging it version. I head over to myself now. I didn't even do an introduction, did I? I'm Tony Caink. For the last couple of years, I've been head of lean portfolio management at Nationwide, and now my role has adapted, a bit of a pivot myself, to operating model. Whatever we mean by operating model, of course, that could mean just about, lots of things, lots of people. I'm just using the strapline people, process and tooling, so it's, yes, organise the teams, but what are the processes that they're using? These are all part of our operating model, particularly focused on things that are central in a company and usually perceived by teams to be bureaucratic in a bad way. But then how do you make that bureaucracy from a disabling one to an enabling one? There will always be some rules of the road. So how do we make those things constructive? Of course, when you talk operating model, organise the people is the theme that most people imagine, and they jump too quickly. This model here is something that we're using now in expressing our framework for all of our ways of working and processes across Nationwide. And this is nested value streams. So if you've got the book, if you've got the Sooner Safer Happier book, turn to chapter 5, because basically that's what we're following. So there it talks about nested value streams, meaning the virtual teams, if you like, the cross-functional teams that deliver a value. So this is not to do with the line management structures. It's orthogonal or cross-cutting across those line management structures, but quite explicitly people are now being organised into cross-functional teams inside value streams. Now, value streams is, we're taking the view, as does the Sooner Safer Happier book, that they're a fairly big chunk of the organisation. You might have 100 people. Now, inside a team of 100 people, you could be as agile as all get out, or you could just be 100 people running around delivering projects, still in a more traditional little portfolio. For the time being, we don't care in the sense that we want to help the organisation stabilise around its value streams, understand who the lead roles, responsibilities are, understand the scope of them, and keep them stable, at least at that scope, even if they're doing projects inside. So at the moment, we've shown across the bottom projects and programs as if it's an alternate method, because still in most people's minds, they see it sort of, you're doing projects or you're doing product-oriented development, though it's not so black and white really. From a funding and capacity point of view, we've just gone through a re-implementation of our tooling to make it very formal how the value streams are represented. So all of our strategic investment funding, all our portfolio that's explicitly our change budget, if you like, is now organised into value streams. There are a few programs sitting outside that find their money somewhere else that are still organised like a traditional program. But by far the majority of our work now is organised around value streams, which of course does not presume that inside that everyone's got these fantastic modern ways of working. They could have quite a lot of variation still. And occasionally, but only occasionally, we get this concept of a cross-cutting program, and that word programming important to split out into its different meanings. So the program across the bottom, the horizontal one, typically it might be something that's re-platforming, for example. So it's called a program because after a couple of years, they hope they've finished the the re-platforming theoretically, and that program would shut down. So it's really the same as a value stream because it owns all its own things. It's DevOps, it's build and run and so on all together. So that can be a program on the horizontal. Then you get some other kinds which you see in companies typically formed around a problem statement. Some problem statement like there's a new regulation coming in, or something like Brexit happens, so we've got to reorganise rules and regulations across the company. So there'll be some coordination, but usually what happens when you look closely at those programs, they do the coordination, but the work from those cross-cutting programs still ends up inside a value stream somewhere. And really it serves as a coordination point and an on-ramp to work that goes into all the other areas. I think we'll move on to the next slide and we'll talk about work and how it comes across that. So we already had mentioned a couple of times of this concept of the golden thread, which we've explicitly implemented to make it, clear linkages as shown by the data. We're tracking now just how much of our backlogs are properly linked all the way up to our strategy in the portfolio. So that's a very real data structure. And here I've overlaid approximately how that ends up looking. So down at the team level, you'd be doing exactly what you'd expect, managing epics and stories on a backlog, clear visibility of your OKRs, your objectives and key results. But we've formalised at a value stream level, they will have a roadmap made up of OKRs. And that also helps with our product ownership model, because when you move from the team level product owner perhaps to the product owner of a wider service, they're not going to read every story, are they? They can't cope. So how do they handle that? It's by just bring the team together to do their OKRs and then delegating the work. So this method, I think there might be one click of animation on here, Richard, if you, yes, I'll look at that. It allows delegation of authority or delegation of decision-making rights gets talked about. It's all very formal in a regulated banking situation, you know, who has the authority and the accountability and the, you know, all the regulatory schemes tend to be bandied about. But really it's about the transparency of the work flowing down, helps everyone to see, right, I see who is handling that. It's okay. If I need to talk to them, I can call them because I can see in the system who's looking after those components of work and pick that up. And you can, vice versa, the teams can see clearly up to the big strategic outcomes. What are we delivering towards? What's the purpose of what we're doing? And again, culturally, well handled culturally by, you know, good team level leadership that will help people to see their alignment to purpose and create, you know, better well-being by just understanding why we're here and being able to deprioritize work that isn't related at all to that strategy. So all those dynamics are what we see when people start linking that work up. One more slide on a double click inside value stream. A fair bit on this one. This is not all done by any means. So we will continue to mature our operating model. It shows various aspects of things: funding, applications, funding, roadmap, outcomes. Those top three things we have done. Funding, as I mentioned, is now aligned to value stream. The outcomes are usually delivered by a single value stream where possible. Sometimes they cut across the really big outcomes, and then you know, each one delivers OKRs contributing to that. That makes the roadmap visible. Resourcing is definitely aligned here. Now, the hack that's really important, if anyone's from a portfolio traditional or in a traditional portfolio context, those top couple of things, the funding and the resourcing, they do look like a program, like you'd have those for a traditional program as well. So there's a hack here where you just tell everyone our value streams, they're going to smell like programs at first. That's okay, but they're going to keep them. We're going to keep them for the long haul because we're going to bring run and change together inside there. So now you see those next things, the data, the applications, the operational processes. A program doesn't typically own those things. Those are the run aspects, aren't they? So here in a value stream, we're bringing build and run together. So those responsibilities come inside the value stream over time. And that's the next big challenge for us to firm that up. We see more and more of the data and applications being more clearly mapped into value streams. Operational processes, we've got focus on that at the moment to clarify that ownership and make sure those things are aligned in appropriately, and that'll be our next wave of evolution, I'm sure. So that gives us plenty to do, but at least a model to help people see how does this value stream model help us improve quality by bringing run and change together, improve flow because you've got a stable construct here that's delivering end to end. So partly done and partly aspirational. With that, I will hand over to Sarah and Ellie.
Thanks, Tony. Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah. I look after the comms and engagement side of ways of working. One of the things I'm going to talk to you about today is about Learning at Work Week. So Learning at Work Week is a UK-wide initiative which is designed to support lifelong learning across every stage of life in the UK. This year's theme was all about hidden powers. So what you can share with others, how you could inspire them, what talents and skills you could share. So with looking at how we're trying to continuously improve together across Nationwide and become a learning organisation, we teamed up with our colleagues in our own learning and development department to put together a sort of 4-day festival, if you like, of learning, various sessions that people could come along to, all hosted virtually, most of them delivered by internal colleagues. And that's really important for us because, as I say, this for us is about, and what you've heard today is about colleagues trying to share with other colleagues, trying to inspire other colleagues, trying to help them improve and share their stories and their journeys. And this was much more about not just what skills people could say, you know, share with people they've done. This was kind of about what drives them, what's their mindset, how do they make time for learning, what makes them want to continuously improve. And all the work that you've seen today, a lot of that featured in the sessions that week. You can see the stats on the slides here, so I won't read them through for you, but the one I would kind of draw your attention to is in the bottom right hand corner, where when we asked people who would come along to Learning at Work Week to sort of score out of 5 how they felt about being inspired to look for more learning opportunities, we received a score of 4.5 out of 5, which for us, if we look to the top left of the slide where we talk about our objectives, which is to inspire and create more interest in learning and help colleagues learn from each other, we feel that that outcome was really delivered. I'm going to hand over to my colleague Ellie now, who's going to tell you a little bit more about how we did that.
Thank you, Sarah. So as part of Learning at Work Week and part of the Learning at Work Week Awards, we decided to launch some awards. We knew there were already so many colleagues across the society doing great things around learning, and this was a fantastic opportunity to surface some of those stories. So the Learning at Work Week Awards sought to celebrate and recognise behaviour changes, bravery and accountable freedom and action through learning. The stories that we've managed to surface have given some really good social proof. It's really demonstrated the benefits of pushing both personal and professional boundaries to improve not just individuals, but the working environment across our society. So if you can move to the next slide, please. We designed 3 different award categories around the key behaviours we were looking to draw out, which were inspire, innovate and improve. The awards weren't solely work focused, and we made it clear that they were for anything. So perhaps a personal learning project, either inside or outside of work, how colleagues had changed the way they worked as a team, or sharing an experiment that they'd run and test the impact of doing things differently. So we launched these awards as a society-wide campaign using just a simple Microsoft Forms nomination process. If anyone would like any more details on how we went about that, please just drop me your email and I'd be happy to send you some more details. But when we launched our awards on the 16th of May, we had no idea just how many brilliant nominations we'd get. Over the 2 weeks, we received an amazing 110 entries from teams and colleagues across the society. And then we had the difficult task of shortlisting them down to just 34 nominations. All of our shortlisted nominees were invited to a hybrid award event, which took place at one of our offices in London. It was great to get our nominees together, to give them to celebrate the amazing things they're doing. And just to give you a taste of the energy of the event, we've put together a short video that we'd love to finish with today. Thanks, RJ.
So I guess that's a quick handover, Ellie. Thank you very, very much. That was an amazing run through. Awkward seeing yourself on video, just by the way. So that takes us to the end of our conversation today, and pretty much to the top of the hour. I am certainly happy to hang around and answer any questions that weren't being answered in the chat. BMK, how do you want to run the next few minutes?
Yeah. I think fantastic. Folks, thank you very much for joining, and thank you very much for Nationwide Building Society guest speakers. And it's fascinating to see the change. And folks who are attending virtually, if you're happy to hang around, that's absolutely fine. I'm going to ask this question, and we will be recording. As part of this recording is available. So by the way, you can refer to this recording later, right? So is there, if any of you want to come off mute and ask the question, absolutely fine. But there are a couple of questions around, Tony, to you around the what's the size of the value stream and how many people are there? Do you want to answer on that one?
Yeah, so our portfolio, if you like, is about 5,000 people, and we have about 50 value streams or 40 value streams. So that gives you a rule of thumb. Let's say 100, but they vary in size a fair amount. And it's fair to say that this concept is a nested value stream. So, those value streams, the bigger ones especially, would break down into product teams. What we've formalized is a certain level where the funding sits, so they're funded at a certain level. And then that has made our budgeting process a little clearer, that we know, where that's done. So now that will roll now, that investment appetite, if you like, is set, by a value stream. And then that's got formal accountabilities about how to do that. So there was another question about where to start on that aspect. And we started with funding, follow the money. Wasn't even my idea to do that. I was sort of the one brought into the company to do that. So I can't take credit for the strategy. And even I scratched my head as to whether that was the right place or not, but it's worked. So I think follow the money, the old school adage has some value.
Awesome. And Abhishek, I know you answered some of your questions about the community of practices. Do you want to briefly touch upon those questions and the context around that, please? Abhishek? No?
I think he might have dropped off BMK now.
Okay, that's fine. I think the questions was answered by Abhishek offline or online. Directly to the chat members. And I think there's one question about the metrics. Zsolt, you have answered your question.
Yeah, was there any other question on metrics?
Okay, so Erko, you asked a question. Erko's question is answered. Paul's question is answered. Okay, I think you're pretty much. So folks who are online, if you would like to come off mute and if you would like to ask any questions, so feel free to do that. And we'll be hanging around for a few minutes here. Anyone else would like to ask questions to the guest speakers, please?
Yeah, I'll ask a question. Or in fact, what I'm going to do is I just wanted to hear from, I can see Tony Christensen is with us. And Tony Christensen, all the way over from Australia, also has supported in our journey. So one bit we didn't touch on is just the level of coaching and support we've reached. Tony, would you mind giving us just a couple of seconds on how you've supported with training and coaching for our nationwide leadership team, our exco?
I'd love to. As unaccustomed to public speaking as I am, I was invited to help out on shifting the focus of the executive leadership of Nationwide. That is to help them understand what it was that they needed to know and say and do differently that would act in the service and support of the great work that Richard and Tony and the rest of the Nationwide crew have been diligently working through. I guess the importance of that piece of work is that often we think of leaders in one category, that is that all leaders need to do certain things, say certain things, and be involved in certain ways. The reality is quite different when you get to large organizations, and the level and extent to which they need to know and understand how to implement these new ways of working is certainly not what most people would expect. So I was very privileged to be asked to come and help learn what the knowledge was of the existing leaders. We're talking the CEO -1 level, and what might be their conceptions, misconceptions, what might be the gaps in their knowledge and their experience sets, and then to work on I guess a group and an individual learning intervention plan with them. It was a great 6 months worth of work. I think we managed to shift a lot of the mindsets of those leaders. There was particularly a few epiphanies that came about in the area of the role and purpose of risk and controls in the organization. And some of the great work that was being done within their organization that they were entirely unaware of, which was helping point out that the systems that they had in place were highly robust, but not necessarily efficient and effective on helping work get done in a fast and effective way. And by bringing some of those key case studies from within Nationwide to the attention of their leadership, actually brought a stark reality to them and where they might need to lean in and focus. Well, that's just one example, and it was certainly a great benefit to help Nationwide do that. Richard, I don't want to take up too much airtime on that subject, but thank you for asking me to comment.
Yeah, it's good. I love the fact that this is certainly a multinational journey, and reaching out. It's not that we only reach out to folks in Australia called Tony, but it has been awesome to be able to continue to learn with folks from across the world, because this is not unique to retail banking, UK building society movement. This is something that is international, multi-industry, and we've really appreciated being able to collaborate with folks like Tony. Thank you, mate.
No problem.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. And once again, on behalf of our BBSSH Pacific Meetup group, and thank you to our friends from Nationwide Building Society. Thank you very much for this fascinating experience and giving great insights, and then really love the format of the lightning talks. And thanks very much, Richard, for doing this slide clicking for us. And also, I would like to announce the lucky book winner from our meetup is Lanny Beer from Melbourne. And congratulations. And so please drop me your contact details and the book is on your way. Thank you very much. And once again, folks, if you are Melbourne based and you do have a chance to go and get a signed copy of the book, and there is a meetup, in-person meetup happening 5th of October in Melbourne. So please sign up to our meetup.com, BBSSH and Pacific. That's happening in-person meetup in Melbourne, October 5th, 5:30 p.m. your time, and you will get a chance to get a free copy of the book. Okay, and that is one. And for the online virtual one on October 25th, so we have our next meetup, Enabling Ways of Working, through Ways of Working Center of Enablement team. So there are much more to come from our meetup group. And once again, thank you everyone for joining, and thanks for all our friends and guest speakers. Thank you everyone. You take care, and bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Great stuff. Thank you.